All right, everybody, get ready for the deep dive. We're talking about spotting fake research today. How to tell what's for real and what's, well, BS.
It's a jungle of information out there, right?
Totally. And that's where credible and impactful research comes in, right? Our trusty guide for today.
It is. By the way, it's by Herman McGinnis.
Oh, right. And could you tell us a little bit about him?
He's like the authority on this stuff. Decades of experience. He's been the editor of a major research journal. He's evaluated international grants. This guy's seen it all.
So he's not just some, armchair expert.
Oh, no, definitely not. And that's why, this book is so important. He saw this gap. Even experienced researchers were struggling with, how to keep up with the latest best practices and all the stuff that's out there now.
Yeah, the misinformation overload.
Exactly.
Okay, so this book, it's not just for academics, is it? I mean, I feel like we all need a BS detector these days.
Oh, you got it. Think of it like this. You're scrolling through the news, and bam, you see a headline. Chocolate cures insomnia.
I'd click on that for sure.
Right. But how do you know if it's true or not?
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So what do I do? How do I know if it's, legit?
That's where the book comes in. It's like it gives you the tools to evaluate research yourself.
So it's like having Herman McGinnis there with you, guiding you through it.
Exactly, like a personal research coach.
Okay, I like the sound of that. So no more feeling intimidated by jargon or, complex statistics.
Nope. He breaks it down step by step. From how a study is designed to how they analyze the data, even things like publication bias. He covers it all.
All right, I'm sold. What's the first thing I should look for when I see a research study? Where do I even start?
McGinnis really stresses the research question. What are they even trying to find out?
Okay, that seems pretty straightforward.
It is. But you'd be surprised how often it's kind of vague or open to interpretation.
So clear research question, check. What's next on the checklist?
The methods. Look at how they collected their data. Was it an experiment? Did they do a survey? Something else? And how was that designed?
Hold on, back up a bit.
Yeah.
What makes a good experiment anyway?
Good question. McGinnis talks about things like control groups, making sure the participants are randomly assigned and using the right statistical analysis.
Ah, so there's a lot that goes into it.
There is, but once you understand the basics, you'll start to spot potential issues, right away.
So it's like I'm developing my research spidey sense.
Exactly. You'll start to see the red flags.
Okay, so I've got my BS detector out. I'm looking at the methods. What else?
Well, McGinnis also talks about biases.
You mean everyone has opinions and stuff?
Right, but in research, biases can actually sneak into the study design, or even how the data is collected and interpreted. McGinnis helps you identify those potential biases.
So you're saying these biases can be unintentional. It's not always some evil scientist trying to mislead us.
Exactly. Let's say a study is funded by a company that has a vested interest in the outcome that could even subconsciously influence the researchers.
I never thought about that.
It happens.
So you're saying we really need to be detectives, piecing together all these clues.
Yes. And the more you practice, the better you'll get at it. You'll develop your own intuition about it.
I like it. I'm starting to feel empowered already. But I know there's more to unpack, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We haven't even touched on meta-analyses yet.
Ooh, meta-analyses. Sounds intense. Tell me more.
So meta-analyses, right, these are studies that basically combine data from a bunch of other studies.
Okay, so they're like the all-stars of research.
Yeah.
Supposed to give us the definitive answer.
That's the idea, but here's the thing. Not all meta-analyses are created equal.
Oh, okay. So how do I know if a meta-analysis is, trustworthy?
McGinnis gives us some really helpful guidelines for evaluating them. One thing to watch out for is transparency.
Transparency. What do you mean?
Did the researchers clearly state their research question? Did they explain exactly how they chose the studies to include, no funny business?
Right. No hiding studies that don't fit their narrative.
That's it. And this is a big one. Did they look for unpublished studies?
Wait, unpublished studies. Why would that matter? I thought all the good stuff gets published.
Not necessarily. You see, there's this thing called publication bias.
Publication bias.
Yeah, studies with positive or exciting results are more likely to get published, right? While those with, negative or less interesting findings, they might not see the light of day.
Ah, so if a meta-analysis only looks at published studies, it might be missing a big chunk of the picture.
Exactly. It can make something look more effective or important than it really is.
Okay, that makes sense. So I should be looking for meta-analyses that include both published and unpublished studies.
You got it. The good ones will make a real effort to track down those unpublished studies.
All right, transparency, check for unpublished studies. What else should I be on the lookout for?
You also want to look at the individual studies that are part of the meta-analysis, right? Make sure they're high quality to begin with.
So even if a meta-analysis looks good on the surface,
Mm-hmm.
if it's based on, like, weak studies, then it's not really worth much.
Right. Think of it like you're building a house. If the foundation is weak, the whole thing's going to crumble.
Makes sense. So we need to be looking at things like the sample size, the study design, the stats, all that stuff.
Exactly. It's like being a mini researcher yourself.
I'm up for the challenge. This is way more interesting than I thought it would be.
Right. It's all about being an informed consumer of information, not just taking things at face value.
I'm loving this. So let's say we've checked all the boxes. The meta-analysis is solid. The studies are good. Anything else?
Oh yeah, one more thing. Context.
Context, what do you mean?
Well, sometimes a meta-analysis might show that something is statistically significant, but when you look at it in the real world, the effect is actually pretty small.
So, like, something can be statistically proven, but not actually make much of a difference.
Exactly. It might be statistically significant, but not practically significant.
Interesting. Can you give me an example?
Sure. Like, imagine a new drug that's statistically proven to reduce headaches. But when you look closer, it only reduces the headache by like 5 minutes.
So it technically works, but it's not really something you'd notice or care about.
Right. So you always have to think about the magnitude of the effect, Is it actually meaningful?
And I guess the context of the research matters too, right? Like, a study on a life-saving treatment is different from a study on, like, the best way to make coffee.
Totally. You always have to consider how the findings apply to the real world.
Man, this is like peeling back the layers of an onion,
Yeah.
There's so much more to research than meets the eye.
I know, right? It's fascinating. And speaking of layers, Guinness also has some really interesting things to say about the impact of research. Like, what happens after the study is done?
Okay, let's talk impact. I'm all ears. So we've talked about evaluating individual studies, even those big meta-analyses. But then what? What happens to the research? Does it just, like, sit on a shelf somewhere?
That's what Guinness wants to avoid. He really emphasizes the impact of research. It shouldn't just end with getting published in some journal that nobody reads.
Right, so it's not just for academics to, like, pat each other on the back.
Exactly. He wants researchers to think about how their work can actually be used, by individuals, by organizations, even policymakers.
So how do we make that happen? How do we bridge that gap between, like, the ivory tower and the real world?
Well, Guinness gives some good advice on how to share research findings effectively, like writing summaries that, regular people can understand, or presenting at conferences that aren't just for academics.
That makes a lot of sense. I've definitely seen some really interesting research that seems totally buried in these, like, super dense academic journals.
It's like a hidden treasure. And Guinness is giving us the tools to, unearth those treasures and share them with the world. He says researchers have a responsibility to make their work accessible, not just keep it locked away in some academic vault.
I love that. It's like we all have a role to play in making sure research actually makes a difference.
Yes, and it brings us back to our main topic today, right? Spotting fake research. By understanding how good research is done, it helps us be more critical of what we see.
Totally. And it also helps us appreciate the good research that's out there, the stuff that's really trying to make a positive impact.
Absolutely. So next time you see a research study, whether it's a news article or a big long paper, remember to ask those key questions. Were the methods solid? Was there any bias? And how do those findings actually apply to the real world?
Great advice. So we've got our BS detectors on full blast now, right?
That's right. And if anyone wants to really dive deep into this, check out Guinness's book. It's packed with insights, and it's a really great resource for anyone who wants to be a more informed consumer of information.
I couldn't agree more. This deep dive has been eye-opening. I feel like I have a whole new set of tools to navigate the world of research now.
Me too.
Big thanks to our expert for sharing their knowledge with us today.
You're welcome.
And to our listeners, remember, knowledge is power. Arm yourself with the tools to think critically, and don't be afraid to question what you see and hear. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep that BS detector on high alert.